My dad's entitled friend told me I should give my baby up for adoption because I'm a terrible mother. I snapped and humiliated him publicly, and now my dad is demanding I'll apologize. When I was 18 and in college, I first met my dad's friend, Harold. From the moment we were introduced, he acted incredibly condescending towards me. The first thing he said when he learned I was studying medicine was, "Oh, so you want to save the world? How sweet. Little dumb 18-year-old thinks the world can be saved." My dad laughed in response, and when I shot him a death stare, he doubled down, saying that what Harold said was funny. From that day on, every time I saw Harold, he made rude comments about me. He'd tell me my outfit looked awful, call the books I enjoyed reading childish and stupid, and when he learned I used to play volleyball, he suggested I only liked it because I could wear spandex around boys. My dad never defended me. The final straw came during a barbecue when Harold interrupted to say, "That's not how you cook. Let a real man show you." He physically pushed me out of the way and took over. After that, I made a conscious effort to avoid him, which worked for 6 years. Yesterday, I went to my father's girlfriend's birthday party with my fiancé and our 6-month-old son. Harold was there, and even though I hadn't seen him in years, he still spoke to me as if I were a clueless child. My son spent most of the afternoon sleeping, but when he woke up hungry, I went to breastfeed him. When I returned, Harold was joking about how I was probably a terrible mother. He began interrogating me about my parenting and calling me a bad mom in front of everyone. I finally snapped when he asked if I had considered giving my baby up for adoption. I yelled at him, asking if he knew so much about parenting, why did his ex-wife have full custody of his child? I asked what kind of man tries to sleep with his brother's girlfriend and, as a cherry on top, I told him to lose some weight. With that gut, no wonder no woman wants to touch you with a 10-foot pole, were my exact words. I left with my fiancé and son, and on the drive home, I was bombarded with texts from my dad, demanding I come back and apologize to Harold immediately. I told him that wasn't going to happen and asked if he had any idea what Harold had said to me. He yelled that, of course, he did, and asked why I was so upset over Harold offering to make me a sandwich. My jaw dropped, and I started laughing uncontrollably. It turns out, while Harold and I were arguing, my dad had been in the bathroom. All he heard was me yelling and then walking out, slamming the door behind me. My dad asked again why I was laughing, so I told him, no reason. But when he pressed further, I said Harold was lying, and if he wanted to know what really happened, he should call Harold and ask. Then, I went off on my dad for always taking Harold's side when he upset me and told him I wouldn't be surprised if he just blindly believed Harold again. My dad hung up, and I didn't hear from anyone for the rest of the night. My fiancé, however, told me he was extremely proud of me because apparently, my comments were not only badass but also funny. I'm glad he thought so. Update 1. I'll start by addressing the frequent assumption that Harold has feelings for me. I really don't think that's the case. His comments always felt more annoying and condescending rather than suggestive in any way. However, your comments scared the crap out of me, and the general consensus of F. Harold was oddly heartwarming. I want to add that while I did regret some of the things I said, I never doubted that I had done the right thing. Most of my regret came from the fact that my 8 years of trying to keep the peace were over. It took time for the relief to sink in. Truth be told, I had wanted to confront Harold ever since the barbecue incident, when I went from, "I don't like that guy," to, "I can't stand that guy." Anyway, my dad actually called Harold the day after I made my previous post. I was pleasantly surprised by this. When confronted, Harold apparently went quiet for a minute before saying, "Oh, I know." He then tried to explain to my dad that he was genuinely concerned about me being a mother so young and didn't think I knew what I was doing. He apologized to my father, but nothing more came of it. I don't buy any of what Harold was saying. The next day, my dad told me about the call. He said that even after finding out the truth, I should forgive Harold for the honest misunderstanding. He also told me I should apologize since I had overreacted by telling Harold I hated him for such a small reason. Many of Harold's past comments were made with my father nearby, often in the middle of conversations with other people, so my dad was usually too distracted to register them. Even when Harold's comments were direct, my dad wouldn't notice most of the time. He doesn't pay attention to anything unless it either concerns or angers him, and even then, he'll forget until something else upsets him later. He's like a goldfish. We also have different definitions of what's offensive, so he never thought Harold's remarks were a big deal. I told my dad that I wasn't exaggerating when I said I hated Harold, and that the adoption comment was far from the only reason. I listed most of the condescending treatment and comments I could remember, including those from the party. My dad didn't remember any of them. I made it clear that I had hated Harold for years before the party and that I had nothing to apologize for. I then stated that I would no longer attend any events where Harold was invited. My father doesn't need to stop being friends with him or even stop inviting him, but he can't expect me to show up as well. From now on, I'll ask in advance, and if he lies, I'll leave. My father called me dramatic, but I pointed out that I had been avoiding Harold for 6 years, and no one even noticed, so it clearly wasn't a problem. It obviously didn't ruin my father's life. I'm not obligated to like his friends any more than he is to like mine. There was some back and forth, but he eventually agreed to my terms. We spoke yesterday about something else, and he mentioned that Harold was upset. I ignored that. I'm not going no contact with my father. Yes, I'm well aware he can be an a-hole, and I've come really close to cutting ties with him in the last few years, but I ultimately decided it wouldn't fix anything. Maintaining a relationship with him has become much easier since I moved out, as we only see each other a couple of times a month. He gets frustrated that I don't call or text much, but he doesn't complain about it anymore. I don't see the point in going no contact with someone who no longer has any say in how I live my life. I'd rather take note of what my father did wrong when I was growing up and make sure to raise my own child differently. He's on thin ice, though, and has been for some time. He's not allowed to babysit, mostly because I don't trust him to spend more than an hour alone with a baby without falling asleep on the couch. I began pushing for him to start therapy when I got pregnant, and he finally started in June. His behavior around me and my younger sister, who still lives between our very divorced parents, has improved a lot since then. I've made it clear that he won't be allowed near my son if he stops attending therapy. This is the first time in my life that my father has shown improvement in his behavior. It's hard to be hopeful, but I'm trying. If I ever do go no contact with my father, it won't be because of Harold. So, that's it. Overall, I'm glad I don't have to deceive anyone anymore. My relationship with my father is rocky, but I won't dwell on it. My main responsibilities are to my son, my fiancé, and my job, and that's not changing anytime soon. Update 2. Openly avoiding Harold has been working pretty well. My father has respected my boundaries. Whenever he invites me and my husband over for lunch or dinner, I ask who else will be there. If Harold's coming, my dad tells me, and he hasn't lied so far. He doesn't insist when I say I'm not coming, either. Since my last post, I've only seen Harold once, at my dad's birthday party a few months ago. Yes, I knew he'd be there. My father promised he'd tell Harold not to talk to me, and some of my father's friends' kids, most of whom I used to babysit, would be there too. I hadn't seen them in a while, and I love them more than I hate Harold. I ended up spending most of the party with my son and the kids. Harold didn't talk to me at all. So, I guess my father was true to his word. My husband and I did catch Harold staring at us a couple of times, but I decided to ignore it. I caught my husband staring back once, and the walking marshmallow I married actually managed to look threatening. I love this man. You know who did talk to me? Harold's girlfriend. Yes, he has one now. She interacted with me twice. First, she came over to coo over my son before making a comment about how he needed a haircut. I already hate her. Later, she approached me and said, "You're shy, aren't you?" I said, "No." She laughed and said, "Yeah, you're shy." She said all that in the same tone one would use to talk to a 6-year-old. I managed to keep my expression neutral, but I really wanted to tell her, I'm not shy, I just chose to spend the whole party with the kids because they're better company than you and your annoying boyfriend. So yeah, based on both of my interactions with her, Harold's girlfriend is insufferable. In other words, they're perfect for each other. I don't have much else to add. My father broke up with the woman he was dating last year and has a new girlfriend. She's not annoying or psychotic, and I actually really like her. They won't last a year, though. My relationship with my father is still not perfect, but it has improved. He's actually started apologizing to me a lot more often. I don't know whether it's the therapy or the fact that motherhood has apparently made me terrifying, but I'll take it. And I'll give credit where it's due, he's a very good grandfather. I'm also glad my father is respecting the Harold boundary. I really don't want that man in my life. Update 3. A few months later, everything had been going pretty well. My dad had been sticking to the boundaries I'd set around Harold, and for once, I wasn't dreading family events. I'd go to dinners, bring my fiancé and son, and we'd have a good time without any drama. I honestly thought I was done with Harold. Then came my dad's birthday. It was supposed to be a simple dinner, nothing too big, and I made sure to ask my dad if Harold was going to be there. He reassured me, yet again, that Harold wasn't invited. I felt relieved, especially since I didn't want to deal with him at all. So we went, and everything seemed fine. My dad was in a good mood, his new girlfriend was being sweet, and it was nice catching up with some family friends. But then, a few hours in, guess who waltzes through the door? Harold. And not just Harold, Harold drunk. I shot my dad a look, and he seemed just as surprised as I was. He hadn't invited him. Turns out Harold had heard about the party through someone else and decided to show up unannounced. He was loud and obnoxious, acting like he was everyone's favorite person, when most of the guests were clearly uncomfortable. I tried to stay as far away from him as possible, just keeping an eye on my son and talking with a few friends. I figured, worst case, we'd leave early if he got too unbearable. But as the night went on, Harold got worse. He started making snide comments to people, mostly to my dad, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. At one point, I overheard him drunkenly tell my dad, "You should have brought someone else's kid instead of hers. At least then you'd have a chance at decent grandkids." I froze. I wanted to scream at him, but I stayed put, focusing on my son and fiancé. I thought if I ignored him long enough, he'd eventually shut up. Then, he tried to help. My dad was at the grill, and Harold, in all his drunken wisdom, decided he needed to show everyone how it was really done. He stumbled over, beer in hand, and physically shoved my dad out of the way. That's when things got dangerous. Harold, trying to flip burgers, knocked the entire tray of food onto the ground. Everyone was staring, including me. I was just waiting for my dad to do something, but instead, he tried to laugh it off like Harold was just being Harold. That was the final straw. I couldn't stand it anymore. I stormed over and yelled at Harold, telling him he needed to leave. He turned to face me, smirking like this was all some big joke. "Oh, little miss knows best, huh? You think you're all grown up now with your perfect little family?" I'd had enough. I snapped. "Harold, I'm done with you. You've been nothing but an arrogant, disgusting jerk for years, and if you think I'm going to let you treat me or my family like this anymore, you're delusional. Get the hell out of here." Harold just stared at me, not even trying to defend himself this time. My dad finally stepped in, and for once, he was on my side. He turned to Harold and said, "You need to leave now." Harold looked genuinely shocked. He tried to laugh it off, asking my dad if he was serious, but my dad didn't budge. I said, "Leave, Harold. You've crossed too many lines, and you're not welcome here anymore." Harold left, stumbling out the door with his tail between his legs. After that, my dad apologized to me, and I could tell he was actually serious. He admitted that he had been wrong to let Harold get away with so much for so long. For the first time, he chose me over Harold. It wasn't just words this time either. My dad hasn't spoken to Harold since. Conclusion. In the end, the story isn't just about Harold, or even my father. It's about setting boundaries, reclaiming respect, and choosing self-worth over toxic relationships. For years, I let Harold's condescending remarks slide, endured my father's blind loyalty, and avoided confrontation for the sake of keeping the peace. But motherhood changed me. It forced me to confront what I was willing to tolerate, not just for myself, but for my son and the family I'm building. My father's slow transformation, apologizing, respecting my boundaries, and finally choosing to stand by me instead of Harold, was unexpected. It's not perfect, but it's progress. He's still on thin ice, but at least now I feel like I'm on solid ground. Ultimately, this story is about growth, mine, my father's, and maybe, in some small way, even Harold's. It took years of frustration and avoidance to finally snap and stand up for myself, But in doing so, I've learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes you have to speak up, make the hard choices, and even walk away from those who refuse to change. Life is too short to let the heralds of the world steal your peace. Now, thank you very much for watching to the story so far. I suggest you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss tomorrow's stories.